right. And thank you so much for joining today's program in Solidarity and Strength, a webinar series which focuses on Jewish Federation Los Angeles's efforts to highlight and elevate issues facing our country, Israel, the Jewish community, following the Hamas massacre of October 7th. Through these monthly webinars, we seek to elevate perspectives from leaders across the globe on topics including Israeli resilience, campus anti-Semitism, and much more. Through this educational series, we really hope to make our community more informed as we collectively work to support one another and Israel. I'm Joanna Mendelson, Senior Vice President of Community Engagement here at Jewish Federation Los Angeles. It is my honor to bring to you today a webinar entitled 6 Months After Taking Stock of a Post-October 7th Israel. This Sunday marks half a year since the horrors of Hamas and their terrorist attack against Israel, resulting in the killing of over 1,200 innocent people and the abduction of more than 240 people. At this moment, 130 hostages remain captive in Gaza, and the war continues to rage on. Our panel of esteemed experts will share insights on October 7th's impact on the Israeli society, the latest developments of the war, and the prospects of what the future holds. We invite you to submit questions throughout this morning's briefing in the Q&A function, and our moderator, Aaron Goldberg, will direct them to today's panelists. Please welcome Aaron Goldberg, JFED LA's Senior Vice President and Director of our Israel office, to lead today's conversation. Aaron, thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you very much, Joanna, for the introduction, and thank you all for joining this important conversation. And several years from now, someone will most definitely write a book about the extraordinary effort of the Jewish people in response to the savage Hamas attack in Israel on October 7th. The unparalleled civilian response and civilian mobilization and unprecedented level of support from Jews all over the world. In our community alone, the Jewish Federation Los Angeles raised an Israel in Crisis Emergency Fund in excess of $35 million to help Israelis in the South and North confront the challenges of war and recovery. Your extraordinary generosity ensured that in the first 2 months of the emergency, JFED worked with best-in-class nonprofits in Israel to provide 360-degree support to Israel's nearly 200,000 evacuees, whether it was food assistance, clothing, the creation of schools, distribution of computers, trauma counseling, or medical relief. We forged a deep partnership with Shara Negev, one of the 4 counties surrounding Gaza, which lost its mayor in the first hour of the war, as well as approximately 100 members of their communities. This partnership is about supporting evacuees, but it's also about preparing communities to return home and investing in the long-term rebuilding of the region. JFED has also supported the efforts to document the sexual crimes perpetrated by Hamas on October 7th and ensure that the world fully understands the full scope and scale of the barbarity and tragic attacks that Israeli civilians face. Lastly, we continue to work with community leaders, public officials, educators, and clergy of all faith to allow them to bear witness to what transpired in Israel and bring that back to their local communities. It's also important to emphasize that our work around the emergency doesn't end with passport control in Ben Gurion Airport in Israel. Federation is working tirelessly to ensure that local Jewish institutions stay safe through our community security initiative, and that we effectively confront the scourge of anti-Semitism and Israel delegitimization that have reared their ugly heads in partnership with many local and national organizations. Our emergency work in Israel and at home over the last 6 months is possible because of the work and relationships JFED has undertaken and developed over decades, and will continue in order to ensure that our local Jewish community and Israel thrive. So today we're going to try to tackle the impossible. In the coming hour, we'll try to personalize the conversation and provide broader political context to what is happening in Israel and shaping the direction of the war. In order to do this, we are joined by 2 extraordinary people. Maya Yifrach, who is the Director of International Relations for the Shara Negev region, and Tal Schneider, who is the political correspondent for the Times of Israel. I also want to echo what Joanna said before and encourage all of you to submit questions using the Q&A function on the chat, and we will make every effort to answer those questions in the course of this conversation. So thank you both for being with us, and I want to jump in right away and start with the personal before we get into the political. Maya, for 6 months, which I'm sure have felt like an eternity, you have endured one of the most challenging episodes in Israel's history. So just tell me, one, how you're doing, and tell me what this has been like for you and your family, and how are the residents of Shara Negev today?
Thank you, Aaron, and thank you for having me today, and thank you, everybody. So I live in a kibbutz, not too far from the Gaza Strip. I work for the Shara Negev Regional Council. October 7th started, as everybody knows, with thousands of rockets, which made us rush to the shelter with my 3 children. Actually, one of them was at a sleepover, so she wasn't even home. My husband is in the military, so very soon after we entered the shelter, he left to patrol the fence around our kibbutz to make sure there were no terrorists in the area. I have to admit that in the beginning, we had no idea. It took a very long time until we understood the magnitude of the events. But I think we started to understand, or at least I started to understand, when we got the devastating message very, very early on about the fact that Ophir Lipstein, the mayor of Shara Negev, died in Kfar Aza. And I was asked to convey the message to our partners overseas. It was important for us that our friends and partners would know about his death before we published and let the information come out. And that's when I got very, very scared. And I understood that we're facing something very, very big, much more than anything we ever thought could happen. And just to say that in the past 20 years, Shara Negev has been confronting a very complex security situation. So we were not unpracticed. I mean, we knew what happens when there's an operation. We knew that when there's rockets, we knew the drill, but nothing like this. Nothing ever could prepare us to anything like this. The whole time I was texting my colleague, Gili, who works with me in the department, because she lives in Kfar Aza. And just trying to understand how she is, what the situation is, just to see that she's alive. So every hour or so, he would text me, there's shooting around us. We hear Arabic. Her grandson was with her in the shelter at the time. He was on a sleepover, so they had to kind of keep their spirits so he wouldn't worry too much. And just horrific texts that I don't wish on anybody to receive. And a lot of feelings of loneliness. I think that was the leading feeling that day. We knew that we had wounded and people that were getting hurt, and nobody was answering our texts, nobody was answering our calls. Just a great feeling of loneliness.
And despite all that, we're 6 months later, and the residents of Shara Negev have shown extraordinary resilience in the way that they've lived and have overcome and have dealt with so much of the adversity, not only the grief, but also being away from their homes and now slowly beginning to return. Can you maybe share 1 or 2 stories of individuals who've done extraordinary things, acts of resilience and heroism in their communities. And heroism is, I think, really defined very broadly in this respect.
Yes, so you're very, very much right. I mean, in this darkness, there are just so many wonderful stories of resilience and people stepping up to the occasion and really being leaders, or, just being able to continue and choose life. First, I think it's obvious, but I feel like I have to mention this. Vered Lipstein, the wife of Ophir, the mayor, former mayor, lost on that day her husband, obviously, her son, Nitzan, who was living in the young adults neighborhood in Kfar Aza, her mother, and her nephew. I just had actually a conversation with her today. So she had a funeral on Tuesday, on Wednesday, and 2 on Friday, burying her loved ones. And I do not know how this amazing woman is doing it, but she is pushing forwards, and she decided to take upon herself the role of leading the community of Kfar Aza to move back to the Sha'ar HaNegev Regional Council, and as an intermediate solution until Kfar Aza is rebuilt, to live in Kibbutz Ruchama. And I think, listen, it's beyond me how this woman does it, but and she is not the only one. But not only the adults, I mean, the children, the youth, they're all part of this vicious cycle, but they're doing their best. We've been implanting, with the help of the LA Federation, programs for the youth of Sha'ar HaNegev in all the evacuations. One of them, just for an example, is a surfing classes. And I want you to think that these 11 communities that were evacuated to over 30 different evacuation sites, not necessarily on the beach, all over Israel, from Mitzpe Ramon in the desert to Mishmar Emek in the north. But these youth are attending weekly sessions of surfing. And obviously they think they're going surfing, but in fact, they're being treated at the same time and getting support, professional support. And instead of just, closing the door behind them and sleeping all day, these youth are waking up, are being active, are going to school, and just showing us what resilience is.
Thank you so much. I want to, Tal, go to you for a minute. And let's also start with the personal. I would love for you to share how you're doing, and maybe a little bit about how October 7th changed or impacted the job that you're doing as a journalist and the coverage that you're providing.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you so much for inviting me for this session. And I also want to thank for, Jewish communities around the world, and obviously yours, but, anywhere else who has been a big, huge help. And I've been covering this as well, and I've been meeting with them. There's many of those groups who are coming here to Israel during this very tough time. And every time I meet with a group, I say to them, you're really brave to come here because the situation is not easy, and your support is so meaningful. Both, any support that we get, but, being here also, it's a huge and unbelievable, personal support. And on my personal note, I want to go into what Maya told you about the Lipstein family, the mayor of the region, because he was sort of famous in Israel. Many people knew him, but his son, Nitzan, was actually spending his gap year, mechina, it's a gap year between high school and military, with my daughter together in a northern kibbutz that is also now evacuated in the upper north. and she was his friend. And on this Saturday of Shabbat, he was texting and WhatsApping with many people saying that he was hit and he's losing blood, and nobody could get to him. I think he died after 12 hours or so. We're not sure because it was very tough to get to him. But he was a friend of my daughter. She spent, she visited Kfar Aza a couple of weeks or months before it all took place. So she knew exactly where the location of his room. He was very loved by his friends. He was just 19, before military. And one of the, very upsetting things that my daughter was not able to attend his funeral because she is a soldier, and the entire soldiers were in a sort of, I don't want to say lockdown, but they were not permitted to get out of the bases for a whole month or so. So she wasn't even able to, do the condolences to the family. And, what those teens are going through, it's really, really hard time. She's not a combat soldier. I have another son who is a combat soldier. He's actually an officer in the paratroops, and he just finished 5 months inside Gaza. So when you ask me, what it's been like for us here, I mean, I don't live anywhere close the border, but we were in this house, we were terrified for 5 months. He's now out of Gaza in a different military role, teaching cadets in the Cadets Academy. But very, very tough time for many people in Israel. And I'm sure your, communities around the world, you all know that in Israel, it's 2 degrees of separation. We all know each other. So here we are. I mean, I knew Nitzan. I met him in the gap year. I only knew Ophir as Nitzan's father, and also from watching him from time to time on TV, but I did not know him personally. And I heard Vered Lipstein talking about her family. So and this is just a glimpse of just one story. We have, I think, thousands of stories like that day and night. And this country, it's not just me or Maya or anyone else. I think the country is in, when you usually we sit Shiva to mourn our death, but I think this time around, we're probably sitting a year-long Shiva. I mean, we only been through 6 months of it, but it feels like a very, very, very long mourning period that will not be healed anytime soon.
And the situation has evolved so rapidly. So in the beginning,
and specifically, as long as there are hostages inside Gaza, we are not able to move on. We're not able to just, move on. I mean, we are stuck. We are stuck in a very difficult atmosphere here. And it's not, it's not expected to just, go away just like that.
So in the very beginning stages of the conflict, there was a very outspoken support from the American government towards Israel for what was going on. And as we think about the evolution of what's happening, the Americans abstained when there was a resolution that was brought to the Security Council. There are different reports about the amount of aid that's coming to Israel and not coming to Israel, the quality of aid that's coming to Israel, disagreements over how the operation progresses or doesn't progress. Maybe you can share a little bit about, from your perspective, of where that relationship is evolving and where do you see it going to in the near future?
Right. So if you go through, statements from the beginning of the war up until now, you see the American administration asking gradually, bit by bit to just, they've been asking the Israeli government to propose a plan for the day after. They've been asking Israeli government to do more on the humanitarian side. And those requests were, remained in the air. Our government, maybe they answered in private, but they definitely did not present a plan, or, they kept on saying through Kogat. Kogat is the military unit that enters the truck with humanitarian aid. They kept saying through this unit, here we are with 200 trucks, here we are with, 250 trucks and per day, I mean. And around December, the trucks went only through Rafah, which is Egypt. Then on December, they opened a second entry through Kerem Shalom, and they started to send in also some fuel and more food, but it was never enough. And the American administrations kept on saying, it's not enough, you're not doing a good enough job. Some days, Israeli citizens went to the border and protest against this entry of those trucks because they said we can't have hostages while entering those trucks. And the entire shipment of trucks was just stalled for 3-4 days. So it was never enough. And the entire world, entire international community kept on saying to Israel, you have to do a better job. But the better job was not done on our side. And I think sometimes in Israel, the public opinion, they don't see on the Israeli TV the exact problems as the entire world sees them. And they're not exposed. They're very, as I said earlier, while we are mourning here and we're still thinking about our deaths, we are not walking up to what's going on outside our own. I mean, it's natural, but the government doesn't do its job of explaining to the Israeli citizens why the humanitarian aid is needed. They do say it from once a week or so, but it's not perceived here as a dire need until and you have all of those statements from Israeli ministers about relocating to Gaza and so on. So I think on February, Israel public woke up to this genocide prosecution in the International Court of Law in Hague. And people in Israel were shocked. They were like, what? We were slaughtered, we were tortured, we were kidnapped, we were raped, we lost the entire region. We are under bombardments day and night from the north, from the south, from Iraq, from Yemen, from Syria. And you think that we are doing genocide? It's quite the opposite. And people were in a shock to find out that it's not going as they thought. The entire world has lost its patience in us. And I suppose this is the situation as we speak right now. We still don't see here on our media most of the devastation on the other side. And we still think most of the time about our own people who we want to see back home, about the rape, about the casualties. And I think there is a huge gap between the atmosphere inside Israel to what is being perceived from the international community. And you see the American administration slowly, at first things were said behind closed doors and were leaked to the press. Then I think in December, Biden came up to this group of supporters and said, Israel is losing support. Then he said on another TV show that Netanyahu needs to go. And it's deteriorating day by day. And it's not like I have a solution, right, to tell you what's going to happen. I think in the preparation to this meeting, when we spoke earlier, Aaron and Maya and myself, I said, we can't predict even 15 minutes ahead of time. So I don't know what's going to happen. I just know that there is a disconnection between Israel government and the American administrations based on this huge internal public pressure in Israel to be more on the combative side, not to stop the war. For example, the entire international community wants Israel to stop the war, and in Israel, it's like quite the opposite. People are like, don't stop it anyhow. So
I wanna pick up on what you just said. I think there are two pieces that people are asking questions about. One is about why does Israel need to be providing humanitarian aid to an organization that tried to kill them, or to an area that is constantly launching attacks from that area? And then the second question is, as you know, there seems to be, in some respects, a deterioration of support in other places. In the beginning of the conflict, there was a lot of unity within Israel. They even formed a unity government. And even that seems to be eroding. You're seeing increasing calls for elections. Can you relate to that as well?
Right. So just let's make it clear. Israel is not providing the humanitarian aid. The humanitarian aid is being bought and paid by other countries. The only thing Israel is doing is opening the gates. There is several gates. A big one comes through Egypt, and as I said, the Rafah entry. There's another gate called Kerem Shalom who goes through Israel's territory. So Israel was controlling the truckloads that went into Gaza through Egypt in order to inspect and make sure that those truckloads are not filled with rockets and other guns or munitions. But Israel is not paying or buying the food or the medicine. Israel is just providing the gateway. So this, by the way, this was not the case before October 6th. This is just the case right now since the beginning of the war. Before October 6th, it was different. So that's, for the first part of the question, the problem for the stalling of those trucks is sometimes the inspection process. Israel is claiming we do inspect them very, very fast. And when they get into the other side, no one is there to pick them up because UNRWA is a problematic organization and other humanitarian groups. I mean, you've seen what happened with, the World Central Kitchen just yesterday. So, I mean, and obviously even before that, the World, the WCK, it's not a big operation as it is. So, and also there is this problem that once they enter those trucks, Hamas take control of the trucks and doesn't provide the food to the people. I mean, we've seen many videos of the food being snatched by Hamas terrorists at a gunpoint or even by shooting and killing people. And you also seen the videos of people running towards the trucks and being killed by Israeli soldiers who are afraid for their lives, or by running over one another by this crowds who just people are killed by just being rammed by each other. So people were actually some of the humanitarian aid that was thrown and got to the sea. The people from Gaza they're so starved, they were just swimming to get the food and to get the packages, and around 12 people drowned trying to get to the food. It's horrendous, really. So, I mean, there's so many problems with that, as you can understand. And the bottom line is that, food doesn't reach the people as it should. So, and the second question was
around unity of the government and the population. There was this massive mobilization. A unity government formed, and today we're seeing increasing calls for elections and the idea that maybe some parties will leave the government, et cetera. Can you relate to that as well?
Right. So there is a huge disconnect, political disconnect discontent in Israel with respect to the way this government functions. Immediately after the atrocities, the government was completely dysfunctional, thanks to huge help from Jewish communities and huge help inside civil society of Israel, who was also backed by Jewish communities. People were assisted by all of the civil groups. The government numbers, and specifically Mr. Netanyahu numbers, just took a huge drop down. Is currently very unpopular, but he has a majority in the Knesset based on the election that were conducted on November 2022. So he has a majority, and he, because of his numbers, because the numbers are so down, he doesn't plan in any way to retire or step down. He also said that, the blame for the event has to go around for so many people, not just him. He doesn't want to take responsibility, like on the record, or say he thinks that he is responsible in any way. He puts the blame on the military. Obviously, they are to be blamed, but not just them. So his popularity is not good. And there is a lot of tension in the streets. There's huge demonstrations going on. The demonstrations are divided to so many groups. Basically, the most important group is the families of the people who were kidnapped, and they're leading, they have disagreement among themselves how to conduct this. There were promises made by the government that the military pressure on the Hamas will bring the hostages back. This promise was made 4 months ago. they kept on saying, you know, wait and see. We put the pressure with the military pressure in Khan Younis, in the southern parts of Gaza. And as you can see, it's been 4 months, I mean, 6 months from the beginning, but 4 months since the first group of the hostages came back, and no hostages in sight. You know, people in there are probably losing their life day by day. So there is this, you know, political pressure, but Netanyahu doesn't adhere to this type of pressure. He just, you know, he want to stay in power. So there is some public pressure on Benny Gantz to step out of the government. Even if he steps out of the government, the government probably will not collapse immediately because they have enough of the numbers. So basically, that's the situation.
Thank you. Maya, I want to go back to you for a minute. We talked a little bit about international support and solidarity, and you've had countless thousands of visitors that have come through Sha'ar HaNegev to express support for community members and individual kibbutzim. You know, we are working on our partnership, and there are others who have come forward as well. What does that mean for the region, for the families? And also, let's maybe start talking about, you know, what the future might look like with rebuilding efforts, and what direction are we headed in?
So yes, I said before that the leading feeling on October 7th was the loneliness. We felt like everybody left us, like we had no one. But very quickly after, and I can say specifically myself, in my role as Director of International Relations, I received so many phone calls from people all over the world. It was just 3 words: what do you need? What do you need? And I can't tell you how important that was. No question asked. They just wanted to help. And I tend to say that in the absence of Medinat Israel, Am Yisrael rose to the occasion. Am Yisrael was there for us. The diaspora Jews gave us so much support. And I think there's a lot I don't remember. There's a lot I shut off so I could deal and have some kind of a normal life. But we met, I think, Aaron, very, very soon after October 7th. I really do not know when it was. Maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, maybe a month after. But the support was just so heartwarming and so reassuring. And if in the beginning we could not even dream, we cannot even think about looking at the future. We were so immersed in now and supporting our residents now, immediate needs. What do you need now to survive, to be able to, is it food? Is it clothing? You have to understand that some of our residents were evacuated on October 7th or the days after. Gaza, it took 4 days until Wednesday, until all the terrorists were cleared from the community. Some of those residents ran to the shelter at 6:30 a.m. on October 7th wearing their boxers without shoes on. So when they were evacuated with blankets over their heads so they wouldn't see the dead terrorists on the pavements, they arrived in the evacuation centers with nothing, literally nothing. So we had to make sure they get the essential needs. So if in the beginning we couldn't even look forwards, when we understood and we received so much support from all over the world, especially the US and Federation, we were able to dream again. We were able to look towards the future and start planning ahead. And with the Jewish Federation of LA, we came together with Deloitte to start planning our 5 to 10 year strategic plan. And I mean, in a process that usually takes maybe a year, we managed to have a 2 months or 2.5 month process to be, and it's worth saying that we involve the whole community. Sha'ar HaNegev is a community it's a council of 12 communities. We're essentially a community of communities. Most of them are kibbutzim, 10 of them are kibbutzim, and we have one moshab and one absorption center. But we knew that planning our future had to involve the communities, and that's what we did with Deloitte. We opened the sessions to the whole community, and together we made plans, and we asked them, how do you see your future? What's going to make you come back to Sha'ar HaNegev? What's going to make you call Sha'ar HaNegev home again? And we were able to put a plan and show it to the government, to the Tkuma administration, present it to them. And some of our biggest projects obviously have to do with the psychological treatments, with building the resilience back, building the trust back, and giving the residents a very accurate support. The support that they need exactly. If it's via education frameworks, everything is going to have to be readjusted, from the furniture in the classroom to the number of children in the classroom, to psychological treatments. And we are planning to open a resilience village, to offer, first of all, to offer our residents, but the whole region, opportunity to heal. And also, we have accumulated so much professional information and knowledge from this disaster that we would like to share it. We've started already with communities in the north of Israel that are starting to go through or in the midst of going through what we have been going through, evacuating their communities, dealing with that displacement feeling, but also providing that information to the whole world. But it's not only going to be rebuilding in the education and in treatments and resilience, it's also providing employment. You know, if before October 7th, a young professional or a young father or mother were willing to put their child in the Bet Yeladim or in the Gan, in the kindergarten, the nursery, and hop on a train and travel to Tel Aviv to go to work, today, they're not going to be willing to do that. So we need to make sure that they're close and they have employment in Sha'ar HaNegev. And that's a lot of the projects that we are interested in promoting.
Thank you. I wanna pick up on one thing that you mentioned. You said that you're collaborating now with communities in the north because there's an understanding that there's unfortunately a parallel between some of the situation that you faced in the south, from the initial attack to evacuees to coming back to returning to then building for the future. And we're now seeing a parallel movement in northern communities that were evacuated. Unfortunately, there's no time horizon for them to return home yet. And I want to use that maybe as a point of transition, Tal, to ask you about, you wrote in January a piece about Hezbollah's tunnels and the network of tunnels that they have compared to what we've experienced from Hamas in Gaza. And we know that there's incessant rocket fire and anti-tank fire that's coming in from the north of Israel. And you mentioned other countries around us as well. And we have a few minutes before we start taking questions from the audience. And I want to ask you, maybe in the few minutes that we have, share a little bit about where you see the North going. Are we headed toward a major escalation? Do you believe that there'll be a diplomatic solution? What's in store?
So first of all, it's very important for me to say to our listeners here on the call, on the Zoom, that there's something that maybe you're not aware of, and that is that Israel is under constant bombardments, day and night. First few months of the war, the southern part where Maya's house was under constant bombardments, but obviously in the southern part, it was also before the war for years. Right now, in the last 4 months or so, there is just day and night of heavy bombardments on Israel's Upper Galilee and even in the Druze area of the Golan Heights. We have drones coming in from Syria into Israel's territory. We have missiles, long range missiles coming into Israel from Iraq. Just the other day, this was the first from Iraq area. This obviously, it's a pro-Iranian groups that are working inside Iraq. And obviously we have the Houthis in Yemen shooting missiles to Israel. It's very far. I think most of the Israeli didn't even know specifically where Yemen is on the map on a bright day in, I think, October, not right at the beginning, but maybe the end of October. They had to open the map and said, what, the Yemenis are shooting at us? It's very far. And this is even before I mentioned what's going on in Judea and Samaria. So we have like 7 fronts: Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, Gaza, Judea and Samaria. I counted 6 fronts. It's very, very tough on Israel's military. When you are looking up at the Hezbollah area, obviously they are doing everything against UN Security Resolution 1701. It's a famous resolution that ended up the Second Lebanon War in 2006. Hezbollah were supposed to be far away from the border. They're breaching them and Iranians as the people who, and the Iranian government as the one who is financing this. They are breaching a UN security resolution, getting very, very close to the border. We're talking about close to the border in hundreds of meters or in tens of yards, I think. Yards or feet, I'm not sure. Whatever is the right term in English, in the US. So they're very close to the border, shooting missiles, rockets, anti-tank missiles at people. About 3 miles from the border were evacuated under government's order, but they're shooting at longer range deep into the area of Israel. And we know for a fact, and it was all published by this research institute in Israel, which I interviewed them into the piece that Aaron just mentioned, that they have a massive amount of tunnels, very different from the Gaza tunnels. The Gaza tunnels were built in what they call it, like a soft shell, or like the land is very different in the south. This is Rocky Mountain area. So those tunnels are different. They are deeper, longer, and maybe older. They were planning the same type of attack. Instead of the Nukhba, that's the elite unit of Hamas, they have the Raduan force, that's the elite unit of the Hezbollah. It's basically an army. Don't fool yourself to think this is just guerrilla jungle criminality behavior. This is an army, well-financed, with troops, with leaders, with Iran's boot camps, with boots on the ground, and obviously the Hezbollah major achievement is the 160,000 long-range missiles that can be around 5,000 of them can be with specific location targeted and shooting at specific locations. So they can hit Israel's electricity company, they can hit Israel's Tel Aviv bunkers area, they can go to intelligence units specifically. It's those missiles, the Hamas in the southern part don't have them. It's only for the Hezbollah army, and they can actually cause a huge devastation all over Israel. So, when we're talking about, this combination of tunnels in Hezbollah and their rockets capability, everybody here are very, very concerned from this huge war that can take place. And Israel said it is trying to push them away from the border using diplomatic means. And when I say that, I go back to the 1701 United Nations Security Council resolution, which said they're not allowed to be around the border. So how do you get people to oblige to Security Council, specifically in a country where no one here obliged Security Council resolutions? So the problem is, unfortunately, you need to make a real threat in order to avoid a real war. So right now, I think what Israel is doing is making those threats and even, bombing in areas where they hide rockets and so on. And we see an American administration envoy, Amos Hochstein, trying to go back and forth between the sides and reach some sort of solution, but he's been doing it since October and we don't see any progress. I'll just say one more sentence, Aaron. The conception, which is, a word that should be thrown away, but, what the Lebanese probably think and what Israel probably think is that as long as we are in Gaza, we're not going to go into Lebanon. So what's happening right now is, as long as we have boots on the ground in Gaza, and obviously people who are abducted in there, they can't stretch the Israel military to do the work in Lebanon. So right now they're using Air Force attacks and they're not entering troops in there. But maybe if we'll reach some sort of a release of hostages in the southern part and in exchange from some sort of for a ceasefire, then maybe Israel will be able to do something on the military front in the northern part. And as long as we're not doing it, we have 150,000 people who are internally displaced, don't have homes at the moment, both in the south and in the north. But in the north, they cannot go back to the homes and their work and their, fields.
Thank you. I want to pick up from here. I want to take some audience questions now that we have about 15 minutes left. So I'm going to ask both of you a couple of questions and ask you also to try to be brief so we can get in as many questions as possible. We are working in the north with evacuees in that region as well and trying to support the municipalities along the northern front. And so it's very, very difficult. I'm curious, Maya, if you can give a couple very, very specific examples of, positive developments in relationships with American Jewry over, the last 6 months in terms of involvement. Clearly, you've talked about Jewish Federation Los Angeles involvement. Are there other relationships that have been developed in kibbutzim or in the community that have made an impact? So that's one question for you, and then I'll just ask the other question for Tal, which is, can you talk a little bit about the extent to which Israelis are aware or care about the anti-Semitism that Americans are dealing with right now in the wake of the conflict? So I'll ask you both to relate to that quickly if you can, and then we'll go through a few more questions.
I'll go first.
Go for it.
Okay, so yes, I mean, we've been, as you said, we've been getting a lot of support from a lot of places around the world, mainly the US. Sha'ar HaNegev's sister community is the Jewish Federation of San Diego. And together, I think with Federation in LA, we're able to forge even a stronger connection between the two, and we're getting a lot of support from there. But it's not only federations, a lot of private people who have been approaching us, but the bigger organization, KKL, Kakal, the Jewish Agency, Keren HaYesod, the Jewish Federation, the JNF USA have been very, very helpful. And from Australia, people in Japan have been calling out, Germany. I mean, it really from all over the world. We're very fortunate.
Amazing. Tal?
Yeah, of course, we've been aware to the events of Jewish communities and specifically in colleges and university. I think even the hearing in the Senate with the university heads was broadcast here live. Everybody were watching this. We saw everything taking place, the way those two of the university heads were forced to resign. we are following anti-Semitism on social media, and it's sometimes I think, and I hear from friends in the United States and Canada, that it might be more dangerous out there in colleges or in university than in here. I'm not sure about that. I have to tell you, there is a lot of discussion here in Israel about how dangerous it is to go to the UK at the moment. So there is like this recommendation, just stay away from London. It's not the same in other places in Europe. I think Germany, it's not the same, and in Paris, it's not the same. But it feels as if in the UK things are deteriorating pretty fast, and it's of a grave concern. I know for a fact that every time there was a military operation in Gaza in the last decade or so, there were huge demonstrations and things against Jewish all over the world. But obviously this time around it's different, and it's much it's much worse than it used to be. And I don't have any advice, just that we are following this, and I wish that Jewish communities will not suffer due to this conflict, that the war. I mean, it's not your fault that we are in this war.
Well, I think you both speak very poignantly to the interconnectedness between our Jewish communities and Israel, and the fact that we have to take into account what that means when something happens in Israel and the implications for our communities and vice versa. And I think October 7th, in many respects, was a reminder to many of us who over the years may have forgotten or have taken for granted the power of that connection, both in terms of the impact of events, but also how we can mobilize together to really change the course of events and do things in an extraordinary way to help our people, both locally in Israel and locally in Los Angeles and in other places around the world. I want to take 1 second also to relate to just something, Maya, that you referred to earlier. When we talk about resilience, there are always 3 pillars to resilience. If I really simplify the concept, which is knowing that somebody is in charge, and I think that was very much undermined on October 7th, because there was nobody in charge, no one there that was really leading ahead, knowing that you're not alone. And at the moment you talked about how much you felt alone until there was an embrace from Israelis writ large and also from the global Jewish community. And I think part of what our community has done is about making that embrace very prominent and prevalent, in knowing that people care and are invested in the future of the country and in the region. And knowing that we're going to be safe and secure. And I think together, through Federation's work locally, we're ensuring that our community remains safe, but also through our work together, we're ensuring that Israel and our global Jewish community remains safe. And I want to thank both of you for the work that you're doing, both to make sure that the story is out, the facts are out, but to what we're doing to rebuild the country and ensure that we remain safe and a resilient people. We have a long journey together ahead of us, and this is just the beginning. And so I want to thank you both for all that you're doing in this front. And I want to turn it back over to Joanna to wrap up.
To answer one question that I've seen here, Israel is sending a sports team to the Paris Olympics, and we are good at the sea, all of this windsurfing and so on, and judo. So maybe we'll get something, but obviously they are going to be heavily secure, the Israeli delegation. But we are participating in that, yes.
Thank you so much to the panelists today for sharing your insight, for your bravery, and for your strength in this moment. Thank you to our audience for tuning in to our latest webinar series in Solidarity and Strength, with prayers for peace, wishing everyone a great rest of your day.
Thank you.